Jeff Hannigan here, and we're going to be talking about this Working with the French series, and we're going to be discussing one of the points of one of the six dimensions of national culture by Hofstede and all, Geert Hofstede and all, and kind of three main authors, and then all their work on this national cultural thing, and the six dimensions. And one of the dimensions is about masculinity versus femininity. Um, this Yeah, we got to keep. I want to extract out of this that the whole the diversity inclusion topic and all the inclusive language stuff came after all this. So I want to just state what they said, okay, and then deal with that. And look at these as maybe we could find other words of masculinity and femininity. We could find other words for this, right? But let's just kind of abstract that out and just try not to focus on that here. Try not to focus on the words masculine, feminine, male, female, and the whole equality. Just look at the traits themselves and what they represent, and then say how the French kind of correspond to that. Okay. Maybe could in the future, maybe this, they can find other words for this too. So, but because of the whole inclusive language and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going to change that here, right? So, not right now. I'm not going to try to tell them you got to change their thing right now so I can give it another book. I'm reciting what the books say. Okay, I'm reciting what they're saying. So the whole thing of masculinity, of these two poles of a range of traits, is masculinity represents a preference in society for achievement, for heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success. So society at large is more competitive. And then the opposite one is femininity, stands for a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life. The society at large is more consensus oriented. It's not always quite consensus, but the French are very low on feminine. It's much more feminine on this, the femininity aspect. Definitely not. Definitely not achievement focused and heroism and assertiveness and material rewards. Definitely not any of those. Definitely not. Okay. Money is taboo. Money is taboo. And I've been told, like, giving messages and topics, like, don't talk about money. Don't do this. Just don't do it. Um, and comparing that to other people, comparing different levels, just don't do this. And achievement, no. Okay, and this goes back to, and I wrote this in my article about working with the French in the Multilingual magazine. In the beginning, I essentially talk about this. It's definitely not okay to. The French try to stay. They try to hide in the middle, not being seen. They don't want to be employee of the month and the winner of the quarter or the salesperson of this. They don't want to be that thing at all. And they don't want to be the kind of the last in the class, the worst in the class too. They don't want to be either. They want to avoid being both, tagged as either. Because it's not good to be accomplished. It's not good. And that comes down to a book called Le Petit Nicolas. Okay. And in that whole book, there's the whole thing of the kid in the class who was the kind of the favorite of the teacher, and the teacher, that parents are kind of like pulling strings and stuff to make it happen, right? So the kid that gets the acknowledgement and the recognition, it's because the parents pulled the strings, right? So the kid used the cards to get the parents to pull the strings, and it all worked. So it's really not by merit; it's because they were pulling strings. And then the student at the end, who's the French system is actually education systems to weed you people out. So they fail a lot of people, just fail a lot. It's to weed people out. So people try to stay not in neither end of the spectrum. They want to stay in the middle, be sitting, and just kind of get on with life. And they're on this all the time. So it's very. I have struggled with this for 3 decades. Okay, I've been living here for 3 decades, and I'm a very overachiever. But I'm really good at that. I'm really good at achieving things, and I avoid the stuff that's bad, right? So, and assertiveness, I'm extremely assertive. and it's just I've had to modify my approach to the point where sometimes it's been really tough for me, and I felt constrained and handcuffed at time, and actually the Germans are like this too. The German, well, some German. It kind of depends. Kind of the German, some Germans that don't like. There's some Germans that are feminine, and I've been in that kind of situation too, where they with Germans that are from feminine, a whole group of Germans that are from a feminine point of view, and it's kind of really weird. Um, but it's it's very difficult for people that are achievers and really want to do well and who want to do it from a point of view of employee of the month, which is not actually for the person's the kind of the American point of view. It's not for the person doing it, right? It's to be a show by example, so that when you do it, then the other people are going to get the next chance next time. It's all competitive. It's a fair competition. It's a good fair competition, but the French don't see it as that, right? Because they don't see it as merit, right? They see it as someone pulled the strings. So they see it as they don't want to be seen as the person that pulled the strings, because then they're going to have everybody laughing at them because they're saying, you pulled your strings, you got your parents involved, you got all that stuff, right? So it's all politics, right? So it's not based on merit, and that's why it doesn't work. That's why the employee of the month thing doesn't quite work. Um, and I will warn all of you companies and institutions that think that you can turn French people into a bunch of Americans to sell. You won't do it. It won't work. I am warning you. It won't work because it's anti-culture. It's against the culture. You're asking them to paddle upstream against something they won't do, and that's why they don't sell very much. Okay, they're really good salespeople. I'm not saying that there aren't good salespeople. There are, but they tend to be the people that go and work elsewhere in other countries. The French will go elsewhere. They're drivers, and they'll go find it. They'll actually do it in other countries. Brain drain, right? And they'll go do it elsewhere, or they go live elsewhere and they come back. And then they're kind of the weirdos, right? Um, and I've trained a few people um, to do it this way. It takes a while to kind of get them up to be really, and then they do it, and it's like they stick out. They stick out like it just. But you know what? Then they say, you taught them American stuff, right? I'm not kidding. It's and people tell me too that I can kind of get away with this because I'm American, right? But I'm a hybrid, so I'm a hybrid. I'm really half and half. I feel like this half and half cream, where I'm not one or the other. I'm kind of both, and it's kind of a weird thing because I've it's kind of rubbed off on me, the whole French culture, for 3 decades, right? And having lived in it and having to accept some things and to shut my mouth sometimes where I really want to speak up, but I don't, because I want to keep my family, keep my family members intact, right? Relations are really important. Family, I talked about in the things, so it's really important here. Um, and so it's but this whole the whole assertiveness thing and competition and achievement and heroism and all this stuff is really not a thing. And I'm warning you, if you're coming from an Anglo-Saxon culture or German culture, and you're expecting the French to be like the Anglo-Saxons and to be like the Americans, to be sell, 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 you are barking up the wrong tree. Okay, I'm telling you, you're barking up the wrong tree. And but there are ways to do it elsewhere. Okay, and that's where I want to later in the book here. I'm going to kind of give some examples, but I really want to tell. I'm warning you, folks, and I'm saying this because I've been saying this for 30 years. Okay, and actually 15 years after I read that article, um, and I found myself trying to explain this so many times. So that's why I'm doing the video series, because I'm tired of explaining all the time. Right? Go watch the videos. So I finally put it in the video series. But and I'm trying to make sure that this is not just this. Well, I'm making a little statement. Yeah, I published on this. Yeah, and I did a lot of reading about it. Yeah, and other people have done a lot of stuff reading, and I've done research onto it, right? And this is scientifically. This has been had a lot of empirical data done on it by others too. Okay, right? So it's not just one person here. Okay. So this is really important to understand this masculinity and femininity thing plays in it. So the French are more feminine that way, which, yes, caring for the weak, very much. For the underdogs, very much. Solidarity, okay? Quality life, whoa, yeah. You don't touch their food. You don't touch their wine and their cheese, okay? That is sacred, sacred territory. Because there's a cheese for every day of life, okay? Every day of the year. There's a cheese for every day of the year. You don't touch that. Sacred, okay? And their vacation, you don't touch vacation time. You don't ever ask them to work on vacation. Never. I do. Because I'll work on vacation, my choice, right? If I want to go that 30-minute meet because I wanted the decision to be made without me, that's my problem, right? But the French would just never do this, okay? Um, um, but of course, they're not overachievers, right? So they're not trying to like make the thing successful. It's all about their family, right? And that's okay. It's okay. It all works in the bubble. But when you got to get this working across interculturally, it gets really, really interesting, right? Um, and then cooperation. Cooperation, uh, it's kind of weird. The French aren't really always cooperative, or they're not accountable. We're getting into the whole accountability thing. And I'm going to talk about the principle of accountability on a special video because I think that's worth it by itself. But but this kind of plays in. So this definition isn't quite all the conceptual things. They're talking that their preference for cooperation, but the French don't like accountability. So they kind of this cooperation thing doesn't quite fit. It's trying to make it a little bit fit too much to another peg in a hole, right? Another hole. It's trying to compare it actually like the Americans, which is not quite that way. Okay, so and modesty, very much got to be very modest in France. Don't want to be bragging. Okay, that's why I don't like salespeople. They don't like marketing people. They don't like them because you brag, right? Because that's sales marketing people. They brag because they want to sell it, right? And they say they're great. And I'll tell you, yeah. And we get people like myself that have been getting awards all their life and career from school, from young age, and merit. I mean, merit based. It wasn't because my parents are siblings, because I just naturally was that way, right? And I did it because my parents didn't have it, didn't support it, but I did. It was just me. Um, Being modest is kind of a hard thing to do, and it's seen as the French see this as over arrogance. Okay, um, and sometimes it's just hey, but I'm coming from a different culture where the culture is this: you're doing it not for yourself always. You're doing it so that others can actually benefit from it too. You want to share, but the problem is that the French don't see it that way. So and I don't regret that. I mean, but I'll learn to adjust that and kind of find it the right time to use it and the right time to adjust and not adjust and kind of do it. It's kind of a navigational kind of thing. Got to have. I've got this this cultural GPS on kind of depending where I'm going to go, which path I want to take today, depending on how the GPS, my cultural GPS sends me on that thing, right? Actually, hey, these guys Hofstede, they called the cultural compass. I call it the cultural GPS, right? So, but and the whole thing that they talk about society at large is more consensus oriented. I wouldn't say that the French are consensus oriented. There is a bit of that. Um, uh, it's kind of hidden decision making. It's kind of, but there is more there's more solidarity. The solidarity thing, that's really important. So the consensus is kind of behind that thing, okay? But it's not quite. I wouldn't say that it's like African consensus, kind of the idea where you're in consensus decision making, and an African different African cultures, where that's really consensus, the tribal decisions. And of course, I'm being generic there, but there are lots of examples of this. So it's not quite that, but yeah, this is the French are definitely in the feminine pole, the extreme there, not the extreme, but that side of the spectrum. Um, and when you got a masculine French person showing masculinity traits, it's obvious the person has been trained in Anglo-Saxon culture. It's just obvious. So or in German culture, so it's kind of that way. Well, actually, in German culture, it kind of depends too, but definitely Anglo-Saxon, it just sticks out like a sore thumb that's been hit with a big hammer. Boom, and you can see it, the red just boom, boom, boom. You can see the thumb sticking out. You can see it, right? So it's very obvious. So that's the whole thing of the French with the masculinity versus femininity kind of spectrum right there.